This is a look at the high-level incident management process flow. In this diagram, we can see the individual steps that relate to incident management, as well as a relationship map that shows the relationships between the processes used within this program as it seeks to deliver its products and services. So let's begin with a look at those relationships to other processes. We see that incident management is most certainly related to configuration management. Configuration management is pretty critical in that incident management relies on configuration management. And it relies on it in order to ensure the timely update of current inventory, as well as information regarding configuration items upon which incidents may have been raised. It's also directly related to service level management. Incident management technically enables service level management to define measurable response and resolution times to service disruptions. And then these acceptable levels of service are incorporated into service level agreements. We see a relationship with the change management process. The change management interfaces with incident management when a change produces an incident ticket resultant from failed changes. We have tested and deployed a change, but some unforeseen problem has arisen, and therefore there is an interface with change management, and the change needs to be reconfigured. We also have a relationship with problem management. Problem management is a key process in which incidents are sometimes caused by underlying problems that have to be solved in order to prevent the incident from reoccurring. In fact, many problems will be the result of an original incident where the diagnosis has found an underlying issue without a resolution at this point. And so therefore, multiple instances can be linked to those problems, and so we see the relationship there. There is also a link to the notification process. The notification process defines a process and procedures that describe the management of operations for communication throughout all areas for managing notifications. So we see the relationship with incident management and its process linked there to escalation. There will be times when, after the initial diagnosis is done, it becomes apparent that the incident needs to be escalated. And so the appropriate individuals would then need to be notified of that process. So you can see the relationships very clearly using this diagram. But having looked at that, now let's take a overview look at the incident management process flow. The process flow, of course, begins with incident identification. And the identification is performed by the end user or by service personnel that encounter a particular problem. That incident is then communicated with support, and the support group is responsible for the initial incident recording of the problem. Directly following the initial recording of the problem, we will enter into incident categorization and prioritization. A priority is going to be calculated based on values for impact and urgency. The impact that an incident has on the organization as a whole or on an individual technology is directly related to the urgency for that incident. And those two collectively equal the priority. So for instance, you can have a low priority that just represents incomplete functionality. So a technology is functioning, but a part of it is not functioning. So it has low impact. It needs to be addressed, but because of the low impact, there is, generally speaking, a low sense of urgency. Okay? Now, The low sense of urgency is going to relate to the actual functionality that is missing. So therefore, that's not just a blanket statement. If you've got incomplete functionality in a technology, but it's a very critical part of the technology, then that raises the impact of that incident. And so we balance those two together, and the organization has set up response times and target resolution times for each of the levels of urgency and impact. That's part of that initial categorization and prioritization process. Then we have the initial diagnosis. And the initial diagnosis is related to the incident itself, of course, and the technologies that are involved. Key activities in this process are going to be to assess the details of the incident, to collect and analyze all related information. So ask open-ended questions of the user in order to assess all the details that you can, and then either resolve or route to support and escalate where that is going to be necessary. If escalation is necessary, then we need to identify the appropriate individuals that ought to be notified of the incident that has occurred. And the user should be kept informed as to how the resolution of the incident is progressing as well. If escalation is not necessary, and it is your responsibility to handle this incident, then you need to be sure that during the investigation and or diagnosis of the incident, that you're entering meaningful information into the incident, because this avoids rework, as well as looking for similar incidents that might provide assistance as to the resolution. We mentioned that the user should be kept informed of any escalation. They really should be kept informed as a part of the whole process on how the resolution of their incident is progressing. Now, depending on the urgency of the incident, the time frames can vary, but good customer service always includes constant, consistent communications with the user. If you do happen to encounter a situation that is going to result in a delay of the resolution, then support group should inform the user, the incident manager, as well as any appropriate stakeholders with the reason for the delay, and then have a status of awaiting with an appropriate reason. Following the investigation and diagnosis, we would enter into the resolution and recovery phase. The key activities here are, of course, resolving the incident using a solution or a workaround, or possibly request a change, including a check for resolution. We would also need to take recovery actions at this time. Details about the resolution process should be thoroughly communicated with the user, and then the ticket needs to be closed within the system. So we see the final step there of incident closure. So there you have a high-level view of the incident management process flow. Incident identification and recording will follow a process of logical steps. We're going to use this flow chart to go through those steps to help you understand the exact procedure that you'll follow in handling incidents. An incident begins with a service interruption, a lack of functionality in a piece of software, the loss of a particular technology. This service interruption can be recorded by the user or by IT staff. If by the user, there are two options for them to record the incident. The first would be to record the incident in ServiceNow via self-service. If they use this option, they're going to complete basic fields in an incident record and potentially retrieve knowledge in a knowledge base, or in the knowledge base, which would represent a solution for a known issue. At that point, the incident is either resolved, and if it is, then we fast forward to closure. If it is not, then the user would communicate with IT staff or the service desk. A user might, instead of using ServiceNow, contact the service desk by phone or by email. And if an IT individual, member of the IT staff, identifies an incident, then they can record the incident in ServiceNow. At this point, we would be a fast track to step 1.5, which is IT staff and service desk. So we see the first step is to determine whether this is an existing incident, either for the configuration item in question or based on the user. If it is, then we would simply be updating the existing incident. If it is not, then we would be recording a new incident. And upon doing so, completing the various fields in the incident record. A very critical step is to identify with similar incidents. If it does identify, then we want to relate the incident with a problem. If it is related to an incident that is resolved, then it can be reopened, and you'll need to input the prior ticket record number as a related incident. The next step would be to authenticate both the configuration item as well as the user information. The configuration item is going to be authenticated in the CMDB, while the user information will be authenticated using Active Directory domain services. We want to determine if this is a known error. If it is a known error, then we likely will have a resolution for that error. And then we will assign incident status to new or to reopen as appropriate if it is related to a previous ticket. From here, we need to evaluate if there's any discrepancy in the configuration item or user info. This is a responsibility of the IT staff and service desk. If there is no discrepancy, then we will move on. If there is a discrepancy, then the steps will be to initiate an ITACM process for the configuration item, if it is a discrepancy in the configuration item, or to make changes to Active Directory based on the defined approved and allowed changes, at which point we would find ourselves at step 1.8. Is this an existing incident for the user or the configuration item? If the answer is yes, we'll verify the existing incident, we'll update any new information, and we will provide the customer with the status, resulting in ultimately the end of our process. If it is not an existing incident, we look to determine if there's a similar incident. If there is a similar incident, then we essentially step into problem management. So we check the related or the latest incidents, we search existing problems, and we want to relate the incident with a known problem record. And at that point, it's a part of the problem management process. If there are no similar incidents, then we will go into the process of categorizing. Okay? Categorizing the incident as well as prioritizing, and that is the beginning of yet another flowchart. So these represent the individual steps that make up the incident identification and recording process. Following the successful recording of an incident, we enter into the categorization, prioritization, and diagnosis process. And this flowchart is going to illustrate the steps of that process for us. Step one of that process is to categorize the incident. The first question which is asked is this incident a service request? If it is, then we are going to follow the request fulfillment process. And so the next question would be, is it a change request or an enhancement application? If it is a service request, request fulfillment. If it is an enhancement or change request, then that has a separate process. If the answer is no to those, then we carry on to 2.3, which is prioritization. So we assign a priority level to the incident. That priority level is based on the urgency and impact that the incident is going to have for the organization or the individual business unit and customer. It is possible that this is a major incident, and that needs to be a question that is asked initially, because if the answer to that is yes, and it is a major incident, then we are going to carry on directly to step 2.9, which is to validate and accept assignment or to reassign. And so we'll go through those steps here shortly. If it is not a major incident, then we carry on down to step 2.5, the initial investigation and diagnosis, which is conducted by the service desk. Remember to match this against known errors and problems. Known errors and problems would be those things that we either have solutions for or we have workarounds for. And so we want to save ourselves some time by looking that information up. You also want to try to identify any resolutions or workarounds. You want to assess the related configuration items, anything else that might be affected. Provide initial support or quick resolution. It may be possible for you, based on your knowledge and experience with previous incidents, based on information that you've found, for you to quickly resolve those issues, or at least certain issues. And you want to document your investigation, the steps, and the results of that investigation. Now, following that initial investigation and diagnosis, we ask the question, is the service restored? If the service is restored, then the incident is resolved. And so we carry on to step 2.7. It is what we call first call resolution. And so we simply need to update the incident record with the resolution and workaround information. We then need to verify the resolution with the user to make sure that the user is comfortable with that resolution. And then we need to update the status to resolved, which results in a closure of the incident. If the service is not restored, and we carry on down to step 2.8, which is to route the incident. The first thing we want to do is to verify that our investigation, our diagnosis, and our resolution attempts are all well documented. This information will be very helpful as the incident is then routed to the support group. Once routed to the support group, we will enter into that validate and accept assignment phase, or potentially reassign. So we'll select the incident according to priority and age, the individual in the support group that it has been assigned to. That individual will validate the incident details, and that individual also analyze the assignment, the priority, and the information. And if it's not correct, then we want to adjust it and document that in the incident record and notify the service desk if it was routed incorrectly. And we have multiple avenues that this could go from. Okay, major incident, 2.4, if it's been incorrectly assigned and it was actually a major incident, then we will follow that route. This could be 3.4, which would be your escalation. 3.9, we're reopening an incident that was already there. Or 3.12, you received an unsatisfactory user survey and we have to deal with that. Assuming that it was correctly routed, though, we step into step 2.10, which is the investigate, diagnose, and identify resolution. The responsibility is the assigned support group and or individual. That individual needs to assess the incident details, to collect and analyze any related information, then to search the knowledge base for solutions to this issue, identify a resolution or workaround, identify and assess any related configuration details, and then update the record with any relevant information that has been found. Okay? Now, when we identify a resolution or a workaround, we need to identify then if that is going to require a change request. If it is going to require a change request, then we will initiate change management. And the responsibility is on the assigned group or individual, but we will be reporting to change management. So we will link the incident to change and we'll update the status to awaiting change, and then it will enter in to the change management process. If it's not something that's requiring a change request, then notice we will bypass that and just enter in to our resolution stage, where we use the information that we have obtained in order to resolve the problem. So there you see the steps that will be required as a part of the categorization, prioritization, and diagnosis process. The final step in the incident management process is going to be the resolution and closure. And so this flowchart will walk us through the various steps in that process. We can see that the process is going to begin based on the outcome of processes in the previous step. For instance, the incident being routed from the service desk to the support group, or the incident being evaluated as to whether or not it requires a change request. And if it does not require a change request, then we move on to resolve and close the incident. Or the last option is after the change management has occurred, if it was an incident that required a change request. So regardless of those three ways, we get to step 3.1, the deploy and test the resolution. And this is based on, or the responsibility here lies with the individual who is assigned. They need to apply the solution and test it, and we need to verify then the solution with the customer. So you need to ensure that the solution has actually succeeded in resolving the problem, but not only that, also communicate with the customer to make sure that they are convinced of the successful resolution. When that has occurred, then we will update the incident record with the resolution and or any workaround information that might be necessary, and of course update the known error knowledge base, because this incident could occur again in the future, and that updated information will be helpful to the individuals assigned to future incidents. And then we come to a pathway in our chart. So the question is the incident actually resolved? If the answer is yes, then we're going to fast forward on to asking another question. Was that a final resolution or a workaround? Scroll down a bit. If it was a final resolution, then you want to validate the ticket information and verify the category and priority. This is the assigned individual. You want to update a notification message to the user, and then you want to update the status to resolved and select a cause mode, and or a cause code, excuse me, so that we know exactly what the cause of the problem was. Once that has been done, then we would notify the user of resolution, and we would send a standard customer satisfaction survey to the user for each incident so that they can respond to us. The user completes that customer satisfaction, and we can see that going on, but we don't want to get too far down here. If the if the incident was not resolved, then do we need to escalate? Is this escalation needed? Functional escalation, hierarchical escalation? If yes, we're going to go back to the 2.9 in the previous flowchart, and we're going to assess this situation again. If it is not an escalated issue but still unresolved, then is it unsolvable? If it is yes, we want to indicate that it's unsolvable, and the assigned individual should document the details and initiate problem management. At that point, we would update the status to awaiting problem and relate the incident to a problem, and it gets into your problem management process. And that's certainly going to sometimes be possible. There is no workaround. There is no resolution to this issue. And so at that point, it would have to go into problem management. Now, if it's not unsolvable, then we're going to have to go back to step 2.9 to assess again. Because if it's not unsolvable and it's not needing to be escalated, then something we need to figure out what the actual issue is at that point. Now, if we did go into problem management, you can see that that goes to initiate problem management. That is up to the assigned individual to initiate problem management, to assign a problem candidate, and then continue on to this level again. All right. Now, when we get down to system automation, say we could get here because the the status record is resolved, either off of problem management or just because it was initially resolved. Remember, we notified the user of resolution and then we sent them the customer satisfaction survey. Now, we have another little avenue that could be taken here. 310, did the incident reoccur within 5 days? Is it opened? Okay. If no, after 5 days, then we update the status to closed, and that's the end of the process. If the incident does reoccur within 5 days, then we would reopen. We would go back to the assess stage. Okay? The user, when they complete the customer satisfaction survey, system automation can flag unsatisfactory survey responses. Otherwise, it'll just input survey responses and create reporting. That information will go to the leadership team. It'll be the leadership team's responsibility to review those survey reports and unsatisfactory information and to determine corrective action. Does the incident need to be reopened? Should it be reassigned? Should we create a new incident? And so once that response has been determined, the user will at that point be notified. So there you see the process by which we will resolve and close issues, the final steps to the incident management process as a whole.